Hey guys, some of our patrons have heard about the surge that's happening, the COVID surge that's been happening in Japan recently. They've been asking about that and also asking about how it's been affecting us. So the average numbers until recently were about 10 to 20,000 new cases a day in Japan. That was sort of where it had sort of settled at. And then over the last few days, it's gone from 10 or 20,000 cases a day to 95,000, 98,000 cases a day. So quite the surge, quite the increase. As far as how it affects us, it seems like there seems to be less people seriously physically affected by it than what there was. Maybe the medical system's gone on top of it better or whatever, who knows. But the way it affects us, irrelevant to whether you believe in it or not, every time we make a video about this topic, there's always a bunch of people that come along and say it doesn't exist and it's all fake and it's a conspiracy and all sorts of stuff like that. So irrelevant of whether you believe it exists or don't, as someone who's had it, you tend to believe it exists when you've experienced it firsthand. But whether you believe it or not, how it affects you in Japan is there's a lot of guidelines. Some of you know, we reported on this over the last couple of years, they don't actually bring in laws to govern behaviour about COVID. They just have guidelines that Japanese people just naturally follow. So, how it's affected us. The first one is we'll touch on the tourism thing. We've made a video recently talking about how they'd let in 50 people into the country for tourism. Let 50 people into a country of 127 million as a trial to see what would happen. And surprisingly enough, that 50 people didn't make a big difference to their COVID numbers. Surprise, surprise. So then they decided to open up and then they're letting in 5,000 a day or something like that, providing they were on guided tours and that were approved tour companies and they were only allowed to go to approved places and it all had to be registered and logged, and they were really, really strict about it. But of course, now we've had this big surge. Now they're talking about tightening the restrictions again, right? So just when the tourism industry and the people that we know in the tourism industry were starting to feel a bit more enthusiastic because there's some light at the end of the tunnel, the government goes into panic mode again and will probably shut it down, which is sort of irrational really, because the surges that we're getting in COVID aren't coming from outside Japan, they're coming from inside Japan, obviously. So, you know, letting in fully vaccinated PCR tested people, which is the rule, you can't get into Japan unless you're fully vaccinated and you've been PCR tested recently, like within 48 hours, you know, you'd think that those people were actually pretty low risk and that wouldn't make any difference at all to the COVID numbers when you've got 127 million people already here. So it's sort of illogical, but as we've seen over the last couple of years, COVID does tend to bring out, or talk of COVID, does tend to bring out the illogical, irrational behaviour in lots of people, doesn't it? Including governments. So that's not good news for the people that are wanting to come here for a holiday, because they'll probably panic and make it harder for a bit longer. So it's just a matter of patience, guys. This isn't going to go on forever. Feels like it is, but it won't. As for the question about how it's affecting us, again, it's not really COVID that's affecting us. Now, some of you already know, we already had it. The whole family had it. And for about a week we were a bit sick and then we got better and it was all good. And the COVID itself didn't do us a lot of harm. What does us a lot of harm is we can't go to work, we can't do anything. And this week what we had was one of the kids, oh, that was lightning, guys. Boom. One of the kids had some other kids in the same grade at school, had COVID over the last week, and then our kid was told, or all the kids in that grade were told they had to stay home. So because 5 or 6 kids in that grade had it, they told all the kids in that grade to stay home for 3 days, right? So I was like, oh, that's pretty irrational. Okay, yeah, well, we'll do that. So one of our kids stayed home for 3 days. Now, some of you might remember a video recently talking about how if you ask Japanese people to make a decision, they'll always make a conservative one. So the wife phoned up the kindergarten to see if the kindergarten kid could still come. And I said to her, you know what they're going to say. She rang up and she said, the other kid has to stay home because all the kids in her grade have to stay home because 5 kids have got COVID. What should we do with the kindergarten kid? And naturally, the kindergarten kid said, the kindergarten people said, oh, she should stay home too. Naturally, right? Naturally. So she had to stay home too. So then we got the kindergarten kid and the school kid both staying home, and then on the third day, when the day before they're supposed to go back to school in kindergarten, this 3-day quarantine thing, on the third day, the little one, who wasn't in a class that had kids that had COVID, got a fever. So the rule is, or the guideline is here, that a temperature of higher than 37 means you have to stay home, right? And that's most schools, most kindergartens, universities, workplaces. 37's the guideline. And then if they hit 38, they're supposed to go to a clinic, right? So the little one hit 37. Oh, geez, here we go. 37 and a half. Oh, here we go. So she had to stay home, right? And then the wife phoned the school, and I said, you know what they're going to say? So she's phoned up the school and said, the little one's got a temperature, 37 and a half, what should we do? Oh no, the school kid has to stay home too. And then I couldn't go to work, because when someone in your family's got a fever, you're not allowed to go to work. In most workplaces, they've got a rule. So this is a constant cycle that we've been battling the last couple of years. And because it turned out, of course, we had 48 hours of that, another 2 days of that, and then the little one got PCR tested and came back negative. So it wasn't COVID anyway, right? But it doesn't matter that it's not COVID. It's because all these guidelines that the last couple of years, it's been really messing us up. The amount of work I've missed, the last 2 years, my income over the last 2 years compared with the 2 years prior is just abysmal. And most of it's because of this. I only missed 1 week of work because of having COVID myself. All the rest of the work I've missed has either been because someone around me had a fever or something, and that made me a close contact person, or one of my co-workers or someone that we work for or work with had it. So it's just been, the answer to the question, how's it been affecting you? Well, this stuff, COVID itself hasn't been a problem, but this stuff's been a real problem, the last 2 years, but the last couple of weeks too has just been abysmal, absolutely abysmal. Wanting to work and can't work is a frustrating thing. No doubt some of you know about that. Just to add to it too, look, on a side note, well, it's a related note, mentioned recently about our patrons and our Patreon support. I don't know if it was that video where I mentioned it or not, but the last couple of weeks, or 3 or 4 weeks, our patrons, a couple of our bigger patrons disappeared, or a few of our bigger patrons disappeared, just stopped supporting the channel, and then a few others dropped their support from what they were supporting us at were down to like $2 a month or something from what they were supporting us at. So our patron support for the channel has just plummeted. So possibly, that's an indirect result of COVID too, that those people are struggling with their incomes for whatever reason. And so they've had to drop their support, So it's just been terrible. The answer to the question, how has it been affecting you? It's devastating us. It's devastating us. Some of you have been with us for a while will know about the infamous corkboard. The corkboard's where all the bills go. And end of July is the next round of bills that we get, for tax and city tax and just bills, all turn up. What do you call it? Pension. We've got to pay pension, and we've got to pay health insurance and all those things. They turn up at the end of the month. And it's just been abysmal. So yeah, look, it's sort of disappointing news, isn't it? We know some of you guys have been planning on coming to Japan and really looking forward to it, and this might delay it a bit. Probably will. And chances are we haven't seen the end of that spike. It's probably going to keep going up. So as those numbers go up, it's going to put the pressure on the government not to let people in. So yeah, but as for how it affects the people living in Japan, this is how it affects us. You know, it's just a pain in the neck. Everybody's sick of it, aren't we? Everybody around the world's sick of it. Whether you believe it exists, or you think it's a conspiracy or not true, or whatever your beliefs are. And we accept everybody else. Lots of people have different ideas on this. That's all fine. Please, in your comments, please be respectful. There's no need, just because someone thinks differently from you about this thing doesn't mean to insult them and tell them that they're stupid just because they don't believe what you believe. We don't tolerate that sort of intolerance, ironically. But you know, everybody should be able to have an opinion without insulting other people. You know, it's possible to do that, isn't it? Express your opinion without being insulting. But whatever your opinion is of COVID, everybody's sick of it, aren't they? There's nobody that's not sick of hearing about it. It's been a pain in the neck, hasn't it? So anyway, there's that. But just before I go, I've got to say this. I can't make this video without saying this. If you haven't supported us, or if you're not supporting the channel on Patreon already, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon or through PayPal. Again, just a quick thank you to our PayPal supporters too. You guys don't get mentioned enough. And I don't get to communicate with you guys as much as I do with the patrons. So again, thank you to those who are supporting us through PayPal. Anybody who's already supporting us and can step up their support, that'd be really appreciated. There's links underneath the video. Had to say that, had that written in big red letters. Got a note here of things I had to remember to say. That was there in big letters to remind me, because it's the most important part for us. That's from our purely selfish point of view. That's the most important part of that story. But we know there'll be other bits there that are important to other people. Anyway, that was that. That's the answer to those two questions. What's happening and how's it affecting us? Anyway, more videos coming soon.